Welcome to Paranormal Nightshift, your go-to spot for everything that goes bump in the dark, where we bring your fan-submitted stories to life. Today's spine-tingling tale comes from Art, and it's titled Jacob. But before we dive in, we've got something special for you. Head over to paranormalnightshift.com and grab a free copy of our first ebook in the Dimensional Desperado series, The Birth of Dimensional Desperado. Follow Buck Freeman as his journey into the paranormal begins. It's a story you won't want to miss. Now, dim the lights, settle in, and let's get into today's story, Jacob. The house I grew up in was never what you'd call normal. It wasn't a spooky mansion or an eerie cabin in the woods, but it had its own sense of isolation and an undeniable air of mystery. My parents bought a mobile home in 1989, smack in the middle of 5 acres of undeveloped land. Back then, the town itself was just beginning to grow, and we had no neighbors for miles. It was quiet, serene even, but that stillness came with a price. My dad worked at the hospital and was often on call at all hours of the night, leaving my mum alone with her thoughts and the strange sounds that became part of our lives. It started with footsteps, soft at first, then unmistakable. My mom would lie awake listening as something heavy walked across the roof. The metal creaked and bent under the weight, making its way from one end of the house to the other. She'd call my dad home, frantic, convinced someone was up there. Every time he'd climb onto the roof with a flashlight, and every time he found nothing, no footprints, no sign of an intruder. The footsteps weren't the only things. Over the years, small objects would go missing, keys, cups, toys, only to reappear in odd places days later. Doors would slam shut without warning, even on still, windless days. And then there were the whispers, soft, faint, but definitely there. My mum said they were just out of reach, like someone talking in the next room. When I came along, the activity didn't stop. If anything, it intensified. One particular event still sends chills down my spine, even though I was too young to remember it myself. I was about 2 years old, being babysat by my mum's best friend. She told the story countless times, and her voice always trembled when she recounted it. I had been playing in front of a 3-way mirror, wearing a red shirt and yellow overalls. She said she glanced up at me and froze. 2 of my reflections mirrored me perfectly, but the third was different. In that reflection, I wasn't looking at myself. I was staring straight at her, my expression completely blank, my clothes entirely different. She didn't hesitate. She grabbed me, bolted out of the house, and left the doors wide open. She never set foot in our home again. A couple of years later, things took a stranger turn. I started talking about a friend named Jacob. "I'm playing with Jacob," I'd tell my mum. She thought it was just the imagination of a 4-year-old. Everyone has imaginary friends at that age, right? It wasn't until she found the name Jacob written in cursive on the bathroom mirror while I was in the tub that she began to wonder. I didn't know how to write cursive, and I certainly didn't know how to spell Jacob. As the years went by, my 2 younger siblings were born, and they had their own encounters with Jacob. My sister would giggle in the corner of the room, telling my mom, "Jacob's being silly." My brother would insist that Jacob didn't want him to clean up his toys. It was as if this Jacob was just another member of the family. But the presence in our home wasn't always playful. Sometimes it was downright terrifying. The whispers grew louder, the footsteps heavier. Doors would slam with such force that they shook the walls. My parents became desperate. They brought in our pastor to pray over the house, hoping to banish whatever was haunting us. My mum burned sage, walking through every room, every corner, muttering prayers under her breath. But no matter what they did, the feeling remained, the sense that we weren't alone, that we were being watched. Eventually, my parents sold the trailer. They decided to build a permanent home on the same lot, hoping a fresh start might put an end to the strange occurrences. But the hauntings didn't stop. If anything, they seemed tied to the land itself. By the time I became a father, I'd come to accept that whatever haunted that property wasn't leaving. I tried to push it to the back of my mind, chalking up my childhood experiences to overactive imaginations and coincidence. But then, one visit brought it all flooding back. We were at my parents' house, letting my kids play in the yard. My daughter was running and laughing, her face glowing with the pure joy only children have. Then she stopped, turned to me, and said something that made my stomach drop. "I'm playing with the little boy, Jacob." I froze. We had never shared those stories with her. She knew nothing about Jacob or the strange things that had happened in that house, and yet there it was, his name, as if he had been waiting all these years for another playmate. That night I couldn't shake the memories, the footsteps on the roof, the whispers, the icy chill of the hallway, the reflection in the mirror that wasn't mine. It was all connected, and I had no explanation. Maybe Jacob was just a spirit, trapped and lonely, looking for companionship. Or maybe there was something darker tied to that land, something none of us could fully understand. To this day, I don't know what Jacob was or what he wanted, but every time I visit my parents, I catch myself looking over my shoulder, listening for whispers, waiting for the past to resurface. Because on that land, the line between the living and the dead is impossibly thin. And Jacob, he's still there, waiting. With that being said, Art, thank you so much for your story. Remember, if you want to support the show, head on over to our Patreon page. Your contributions help us keep the lights on, the stories flowing, and the time traveler fueled up for his next adventure. But hey, if you can't support us financially, no worries. Just sharing the show with a friend or rating us on your favorite podcast platform goes a long way. And if you've got a spooky story of your own, we'd love to hear it. Share it with us right here on Paranormal Nightshift. You never know, your story might just become the next chapter in the Paranormal Time Traveler series and told here on the show. Until next time, keep your eyes peeled for the unexplained, your ears open for the unheard, and your minds open to the possibilities.